Hello and welcome back to this week's episode of the Unfiltered Autistic Podcast. And this week, above all the weeks, I'm most delighted to speak to the incredible Julie Holmes, Senior Speech and Language Therapist, and I cannot ever say this word correctly, proprietor of BeMe Therapy, a really neuro-affirming space for individuals that require support from, is it OT and SLT, Julie?
At the moment.
Great. Yeah, and ever expanding, I'm sure. Julie also is a specialist in Gestalt language processing and AAC, and in fact has been an incredible support to myself as a parent to children that are Gestalt language processor, and indeed my gorgeous, beautiful Connor, who's an AAC communicator as well. Now, I'm not going to stay too long here because I'm going to hand you over to Julie to explain a little bit more about herself and I suppose from her lived experience perspective. Julie is a person with ADHD, and I suppose being a person with ADHD really has influenced her own professional career, but also I suppose reflectively we'll be talking today about her lived experience, looking back over her life and how it has really informed her approach not only as a mother but as a human being, and most importantly I suppose on the context of this podcast as a neurodivergent I suppose therapist working in this space and her own lived experience at that. So I'm going to hand over to Julie. So hello Julie, thank you so much for being here. Anyone that listened to my voice, and I'm very excited because I absolutely adore Julie. I often think we have regular chit chats online and we always end up, I'm sure if you're like myself, roaring, laughing. We were even chatting earlier, laughing in messages. So I'm going to hand you over to Julie. So Julie, would you like to tell everyone that's listening a little bit more about yourself? And thank you for being here.
Yeah, definitely, Amanda. What a lovely introduction. I was just giggling away nervously to myself there because this is my first podcast I've ever done, and maybe last, who knows? Hopefully not the last. But yeah, I'm just trying to think what would be kind of the most useful to start off with, and maybe just providing a bit of work context first about
Brilliant.
What I'm up to, and then sort of maybe going to, like all good ADHD years, going backwards, forwards and all over the place to tell
Love
you
it.
about
Keep it entertaining for us all.
my diagnosis and my lived experience and what it means to me. So at the moment we're in the really early phase of I opened up my own therapy space. I'm really trying to use the word therapy space because I want to move further and further away from this medical model. Like this word clinic doesn't sit right with me anymore. And we're all on a bit of a journey and you can kind of get yourself tongue-tied with different phrases and things like that. But I'm really kind of trying with this space to offer something to families that is neurodiversity affirming, where basically children can walk in and families can walk in and just be themselves 100%, to be authentically who they are as a neurodivergent person or as a neurotypical person, and not have to mask or not have to apologize, like parents not having to apologize for the kid running into another room or pulling something off the wall or whatever, screaming, like it just doesn't matter. So we're hoping to have this as a space that sort of is really welcoming and nurturing for people, and that's why I called it BeMe, because it's just about being yourself. And, you know, we're hoping to expand. We're based in Rathcoole. At the moment, we're offering occupational therapy and speech and language therapy services. We're hoping to do autism identification soon as well. But we want to grow very organically and naturally and get the right people in with the right sort of approach to life, who love kids, because we love kids in there and we have the crack and it's great. So that's what I'm kind of doing from a work point of view. I guess kind of how I got into this area and why I'm so deep into it, you know, basically, and kind of, I moved from England to Ireland in 2018. I knew I sort of wanted to get into the area of autism. You know, I'd worked with autistic kids and really enjoyed it, and, you know, kind of wanted to expand on my skills in that area. And then the more I did, the more I really enjoyed it. So I wanted to do more and more and more. But as part of that process, I just started sort of like just really feeling comfortable with autistic kids and their families and neurodivergent kids and their families, and sort of like really sort of the more I got to know them through my private practice, and the more, because I was working privately once I moved back to Ireland, I could see kids like for longer over time, and I could see that a lot of the ways in which we were trained as SLTs were really not supporting this cohort of kids. Like it was really, I say this a lot, like I felt like I missed a few weeks at college or something. Like the stuff I was trained on just wasn't working for the kids that I was seeing, or it was, you know, the language strategies, the ways of working just seemed to be all wrong. And of course, like any good ADHD woman, I went inward and blamed myself and said, you must be doing this wrong. Like, but it still had that feeling that, you know, the ways in which we were working just weren't equipped to support children in the way we really want to support them. That was positive, that was strengths based, that really saw kids for who they were, that weren't trying to match kids up against like neurotypical norms, like, you know, constantly saying to parents, oh, they're not quite there yet, or getting your checklist out and, you know, saying, oh, well, you know, they're severely delayed in this and there's a disorder here, which is just horrible for parents to hear. So I knew all the systems that I'd been trained on weren't working. Now, at the time, did I know what to do instead? I was following my gut a little bit, a lot of floor time, following kids' leads, but I didn't have a kind of structure or a framework really to give me confidence in what I was doing until I came across Gestalt language processing in, I think it was probably about 2020, 2021. Like, I think I was one of the first people to do one of the meaningful speech courses that Alex Lacoste did. And when I came across that work, I read Barry Prezant's Uniquely Human, and he talks about echolalia and how it's functional and like all the different meanings, all the different reasons why kids use echolalia. So that was my first like kind of segue into that, but it didn't give me enough of what I do next. So then I started delving pretty heavily into Gestalt language processing. I would say obsession would be putting it mildly. And I hope for those listening who don't know what Gestalt language processing is, and this is all sort of a little bit confusing, I'll just explain some of the terms. So Gestalt language processing is a way of developing language whereby children repeat what they hear from external sources as their first stages in their language development. So they might repeat a line from another from a movie, from somebody else. They might say a whole script, a whole song, but it's exactly taking the intonation from somebody else and as they hear it, and the whole thing exactly like a little chunk. And then they follow little steps to move from echolalia, repeating about what they've heard from other sources right through to self-generated language. So we know that a lot of autistic kids develop their language this way, a huge number of them. We know, for me, it felt like the missing piece in my practice. And so once I started finding out about this, I became completely obsessed with it. I couldn't sleep sometimes. I was thinking about it so much, and that happens to me still, because it was just such a revelation, I think. And then I went on a journey to say, you know, I remember saying to my husband at the time, like, this is going to change my life. Like, I can feel it changing my life. And I said, you know, this is big. And from that point on, I just haven't stopped talking about it. And it has completely changed my practice and my life. And
Julie, could I ask you, we were chatting about this just before we started to record. There was a piece recently I saw on social where there was an event for, I'm not sure, does ASHA cover speech and language and other professions as well? But in America, there was, I think it was a conference of some kind, and there was some people doubting the efficacy of Gestalt. Do you want to say anything about that from your, you know, lived experience, but also as a professional working day to day with individuals who do, in fact, like my own sons, communicate through Gestalt?
Yeah, there's a lot of noise in the speech and language world around the evidence base, around it not being evidenced, and it just being another, you know, people call it an internet fad. I've got huge problems with that, because all any of those researchers need to do is come with me for not even a week, a day in my sessions, and you will see Gestalt language processor after Gestalt language processor, because I see mostly neurodivergent and autistic kids. You'll see them in my sessions. You'll see the Gestalts. You'll see the mitigated Gestalts. You'll see what happens. So if they want to join me, so no doubt to you, ASHA people, you can come join me. It's lived experiences. So, like, you know, when I describe this process to parents, they identify with it and it resonates. And like, who are we to say to parents, oh no, you're incorrect, this is not right, you don't know your kid well enough, they need to go through this? Because the other side to language development is analytic language development, where you develop language through developing lots of single words first. So you'll have an array of single words, and then when you have about 50 of those, you'll start putting them together to make 2-word phrases, 3-word phrases, and then grammar and so on. And it kind of is follows really specific steps, but it doesn't talk about or acknowledge echolalia or different ways to communicate. It's just a very sort of neurotypical, I would call it, mostly process that a lot of neurotypical people will go through. You know, that you can be neurotypical and be a Gestalt language processor, but for the majority, not so. So we know when we see kids that they're not going through these stages, and actually that the strategies that support children to go through those stages don't work. So where do we go then? We end up saying to parents, oh, your child's language is disordered according to this analytic language processing avenue. And we give them these tools that don't work, such as repeat back and add a word, which would be a very common one. And if you repeat back a child's gestalt and add a word on, they don't extend that gestalt. Like, it just doesn't work. So, what I say to them is, you've got to think about the motives of these people online, and they're not coming from good places. These are people who are ableist, these people who are, like, I think I saw the phrase, like, stuck in their ivory towers of academia, if I may be quite direct about it, probably don't have hands-on experience and are very ABA oriented, and they're not trying to support families in a positive way. So there is research around Gestalt language processing, and it's building. So if you
Let's go back to pre-80s as well. If you're looking at Barry Prezant's book, like that, what was that for? I was 2 editions. I was obsessed. That was one of the first books that I remember reading. I remember saying this on Little Puddin social media at the time. It was the first book that I ever read where somebody was speaking about autism the way that I understood, especially the echolalia piece, because all of my boys would have been echolaic. And in particular, I remember Connor, when he did have language back when he was younger, like, kind of, when I say language, I mean like capacity to, I suppose, verbally say things. When he used to do that when he was young, we would have been told, oh, don't let him do that. That's not, that's not communication. You need to ignore that. And God, it kills me now when I think about that I ignored his. I'm not saying that stopped him talking going forward, because I know later he would have gone for speech therapy with, I suppose, the local providers here, and they would have said there's either apraxia, or he's a fine line, they would have said, between apraxia of speech, or, there's not a word I like, but severe phonological sound disorder. And again, he also has an intellectual disability. But I always think, if I had just supported him the way that I support Jack and the way that I support, it kills me. I cannot tell you, it kills my heart that I didn't have the knowledge then that I have now. Now we do it all, like, obviously we do everything for Connor that we would do for Jack and Max. And that probably leads me into another question, if you don't mind answering. I know these are all, again, these are pre-planned questions, so Julie's really put on the spot. If you have a child that's non-speaking, is it possible? I feel like I know the answer. Sorry,
I'll
go on.
plug in my laptop. Sorry.
Sorry, no problem.
That would be a good place to stop. Keep that question. Of course, I don't have a
no bother at all. But I suppose one of the questions that would even come to me often as a parent, even or as a professional through Little Puddin social media, even on the website, is people saying, well, can Connor really be a Gestalt language processor as well? If he's non-speaking, how can you tell, or can he be? And my answer is, he is a Gestalt language processor. I know my son, and I know that he is, now that I'm away from that old archaic way of understanding language processing development. Would you have any kind of, maybe if there's a parent listening that has a child that's using AAC, or is completely non-speaking and not using AAC, or at the moment they're maybe at a standstill and wondering how to support, if they're querying, could this child be a Gestalt language processor? What would your answer be?
Yeah. There's loads of ways to tell, and and I do think one of the biggest things is parents know when you describe a process and it resonates for their lived experience at home. They've a knowing, and they might not know exactly why, but some of the things you may have noticed, Amanda, are things like your child. Which child was it again that you're talking about, or any child? Any
non-speaking child. But even my gorgeous Connor, I would often get people saying, "Well, how can he be?" And I said, "Well, he is. Just because he's not saying what you're expecting him to say doesn't mean he's not processing and in his own way communicating in that way."
Yeah, so it would be things like, maybe you would look at how a child maybe uses media. So are they really keen on one episode of Peppa Pig, or one episode of this thing, or one line from an episode? So if you've noticed like a really strong interest in one kind of episode, one song, one line that they want to repeat again and again, I would say that that's like a chunk. I would almost say that that's like your first, like your stage 1 Gestalt, because maybe some kids mightn't have the motor programming, they might be a bit dyspraxic, so they can't actually if that's the way of echoing, that's the way of producing the echolalia, is to replay little snippets every now and again, or in fact in the way they play. So if or the way they move, like sometimes kids will do something called ecopraxia, where they'll do the same movements from, like, I have a kid at the moment who, like, he's non-speaking, but he echoes the movements from the TV. So like how the presenter on the TV is moving, I can't remember which one it was, and he'll do the same little sequence of movement as that person. So you see these little bits come out. You see maybe that they're maybe non-speaking, but that they're using some intonational vocalizations that sometimes, like, parents will always say, it kind of sounds like he's singing Twinkle Twinkle Little Star, but we're not quite sure. And then parents don't want to get too excited because it's just such a it's so tricky then if you're not right, you don't want to just celebrate it too much, but you're like, it does really sound like, or like the other day I said to a kid, like, let's put your shoes and socks on, and he went, no, no, no. And it wasn't exactly copied, but there was bits of my intonation there. And I was like saying to his mom, I think that was an attempt at some immediate echolalia, in the way that he could. So there's little signs there. And the other thing to say about that is that you don't do any harm to kids. And I don't want to get scaremongery about this, but you don't do any harm to kids if they're non-speaking and you support them as a GLP. That there's nothing, you're not going to do a harm. It's not going to be a bad thing for a child. So if you're not sure, the best strategies to use are the GLP strategies, and the GLP strategies are neurodiversity affirming strategies. They're really respectful. They're about meeting a child where they're at. They're about celebrating whatever way that child is communicating, which I think is just the way it should be in speech therapy, not prescriptive, not deficit-based kind of stuff. Just, okay, when a child comes into me, I want to know, sometimes I'm not even bothered. Mostly I'm not bothered about their age. I'm like, what are you doing now? How are you communicating now? What gets you going? What are you excited about? And how do we get you to the next stage? And when I see those little glimmers and those little buzzes, I kind of think of them as like, I notice them, and I think we need to get more of those to help us to get to the next stage. So, it just helps us to focus on this child as a little individual rather than someone to be molded into these very nonsensical
strict boxes almost. And could I ask you then, so say for families like my own, obviously, because I suppose my own background is more recently I've been undertaking a master's in speech and language in the University in Galway, and I've always been, as I would say, obsessed with like visual communication and communication. I suppose raising a child that communicates differently, that really intrigued me to try and learn a different way to support him. But say if you're a parent or you're even an autistic person right now yourself, maybe you want to advocate for your own needs and ask for someone to help you maybe follow this pathway through the Gestalt. If you've never supported your child before through the Gestalt language processing pathway, and now you want to, and maybe the person is non-speaking, or maybe you're the autistic person that is non-speaking, you want that support, it's never too late, isn't it, not to get on board with Gestalt language processing and the national, how do you say it, the natural language acquisition framework. I'm sure I've said that wrong.
Natural language, NLA.
Yeah, I was like, it's too many words for my Mayo accent, but yeah, it's never too late, Julie, isn't it? Not for parents that might be worrying, like me, that would have said, oh God, I wish I'd known sooner.
190%. And this is another thing that I really credit Marge Blanc with, because she says, like, she's working with one of the kids that she speaks about in her book. Not older adults now. He's like 26 and or he's late 20s, they're still working on grammar. There is no end point to this. We do not give up hope. There's a lot of scaremongering that goes on for parents around, like early intervention is really important and it is really good and blah, 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 blah. But actually, if you've just tried your whole life to get your kid SLT, OT, you've like literally emailed everyone that's known to man on in your locality, and you're still getting nothing back. Like or you haven't emailed anyone, but you haven't kind of gotten supports in for your child for whatever reason, that doesn't mean that at 7, 10, 15, 20, you cannot start. There is always somewhere to start. There's always progress to be made. And I see it with my own caseload, my own kids that I see week in, week out. And I don't think we should ever give up hope on kids progressing. And sometimes I think maybe some services might in the past have used it as a way to sort of lower their numbers to get people off waiting lists, to kind of like, but it's not true. There's a lot of research around something called neuroplasticity. And that means that basically our brains are forever changing and growing, and with the right stimulus and the right support, children can thrive. So there's always room for growth.
I even see that in my gorgeous Connor. I put up a video the other day, maybe it was about 2 weeks ago, randomly. Well, first of all, randomly we all had a vomit bug in the house. That was the impetus, I think, for maybe us all just sitting down calmly together, because the energy max wasn't running. The house was very quiet, and Connor was beside me. He had been unwell and unfortunately with this bug, but anyway, I was sitting beside him, and Hayley, I was chatting to Hayley, and I was saying to Connor, I was trying to see, because again he kind of he's moved schools in the last year, and he had a bit of a tricky time last year, kind of continuing to use his AAC device. Now he's moved to his new school. My gosh, he's making massive progress across the way, and he's just so happy and confident in himself. Again, he's kind of regaining his confidence. And one of the things that has been working really well in his new school is that, first of all, they're incredible, but they've been really on board with supporting and everyone advocating and supporting Connor with his AAC. And I remember just sitting beside Connor, and we had his speech device out, and I was saying to Connor, you know, are you feeling okay? Is Connor feeling sick? And he was saying, I thought he said yes, because it kind of sounded like a yes, but with a TH at the end. And he goes to me, Mom, did Connor just speak? Because obviously she remembers the time when he was really little, when he did speak with verbal language. And I was like, I don't know. She goes, I'm just going to record just in case. And then I said, well, let's try again, Connor. I said, Connor, can you? And he said yes. And then he said no. And we were all like, oh my God. It was like Christmas had arrived early, like, because, and again, I accept every which way that Connor chooses to communicate, but just, I suppose, selfishly, I haven't heard his voice in a very long time. And then yesterday evening, he was going to Granny's. And again, I was popping him into the car with my husband. His daddy was like driving, and I was, you know, I wasn't Connor's 6 foot. I wasn't popping Connor anyway. I was popping Max, and I was like, I do well to put Connor in the car. But I was making sure Connor's seatbelt was on. I said, Connor, are you excited? You're going to Granny's? And he typed it, he calls his device his talker, and he goes, yes, visiting Granny, and a big, like, little heart on the edge. And I just went, oh my God. Like, that just shows, with the right supports, the right attitude, as you say, not saying that, oh, he's past the age of 6, there's no more progress that can be expected. There's always time for progress, but there's always time to support. And there's never a finish line with support. It's, you know, there's always a way to empower a person, isn't there?
Completely. And like one of the points you're drawing on there, in the right environment, when they've kind of been more on board with it, I see big changes with kids with AAC in particular, because I think what happens is, at home, parents know their kids quite well. I always say inside out and back to front. And then I think, oh God, is that too much non-literal language? But anyways, they know the parents really, really well, or they know their children really, really well. And they almost already have quite strong communication with their kids. They know what they want. They know what they don't want. It's like this energy, I think of it. And I'll probably start sounding really woo-woo as a speech therapist now. They'll be like, Julie, there's definitely no evidence for this. But it's like an energy and a kind of rapport that you have with your kids. So bringing AAC into it can sometimes be quite different, because it's like, actually, we are communicating quite successfully at home to get needs met, to have a laugh, to have a chat, and it all is quite, you know, it's going quite well. But actually, it's outside that little secure bubble that the work needs to be done a lot of the time with AAC. You know, obviously it's important to model it at home, but where it's really needed is kind of like schools and other environments to sort of support it, for it really to take off and be meaningful as well. And so when we see that happen, it's lovely to see that sort of kind of like everyday sort of like natural chat happening. Yes.
And I see the more that he's using like his device comes home from school needing to be charged immediately, or they've been charging it just so like it obviously wouldn't die at school, that it's always ready to go. But you can see it has been used and used and used all day long, and that makes my heart sing. And even I will often get photos of Connor, like, as you say, it's fantastic that home are doing great, but we need everyone to do great, because it's like I feel like it's another language, so we're teaching it, and the more exposure that you have to everybody modelling, scaffolding that AAC for the person. And I see on the photos they have like a whack-a-mole game, and he's using his device, and the staff are, hit the mic, the staff are using the device, and they use pop-up pirate, and it's all the games and activities that he loves, but he's communicating all the time on his terms in the way that he would like to, and everyone around is supporting on it.
Absolutely. And it's just like, I actually think the biggest thing with it is just for kids to see that it's safe to use, and like that it's an acceptable form. And if you don't, you know, AAC is a funny one, because you don't ever go into a shop and see very many people using it. Like, you need the trusting relationships in your life, like your school teacher, your SNA, your ANA, like your friends, everyone to be sort of using it to make this kind of language sort of seem like normal and like acceptable and safe to use. And so, you know, they might get that a lot at home, but then if they're not getting any of that at school, it doesn't make it as safe to use. So, and what you normally see then with an increase in AAC use across environments is then those little bits of progress, or different, more communication coming out in other ways. So maybe an increase in maybe some of the verbal stuff, or, you know, more initiation, or more wanting to chat to you about more different topics. So it's lovely to sort of start to see that, I think, as well. I don't know if that's been your experience at all, Amanda.
No, it absolutely has. And even as you're talking, I'm even thinking, must remember to remind Santa to get Connor some more, those kind of, he likes the younger games, but that doesn't make a difference. But it means that I can, because I have a device up above on the shelf, kind of behind the camera, and I like I've got TD Snap on that, so everyone can be using the AAC to support Connor. So it's not just Connor, it's everybody, and Connor seeing that other people communicate that way, because that's what they're doing at school. I know at school they're getting like iPads in, and they're going to have speech apps on there. So everybody, it's like a circle of support at home and then at school, I think is really important. I suppose something that you said there, it's great to have that like close, and what you were saying, it's a bit woo-woo, probably reminds me of the word attachment, like the importance of the attachment. But it reminds me then again, go back to your own diagnosis of being a person with ADHD. How do you think has your home life influenced your decision maybe to go for that assessment, or has it in any which way? I suppose that would have been why I went for an assessment eventually, was for my own kids. So I knew that I was autistic. Just my brain is like, I just need someone to tell me that, doesn't know me, that I am autistic. So I haven't just assumed I am, and maybe I'm not. And I need to be not only their mom, but I wanted to be a role model for them, to say it's okay to be the way that you are, because I too am just like you're gorgeous. Well, I might not be gorgeous like my kids, but I'm like them in the sense of from my neurodivergence. And I wonder, in any which way do you feel that maybe your home life in some way, or your gorgeous little boy or your husband, or do you feel in any which way your home life, the way you wanted to, as you mentioned, like the woo-woo, but like that whole piece around the attachment and that lovely circle of support at home, influence your decision in any way?
Yeah, and so it's a good question. It's kind of, I kind of got to my pursuing my diagnosis in kind of a funny accident, if that's the way I'm going to call it. So like, I back in 2018 moved back to Ireland, got really started enjoying working with autistic kids, doing more and more work around it, and like then started working in a clinic that was mostly OTs, actually. So they were very into the sensory side of things. And obviously we all assess each other all the time. So they'd point out a few little sensory things that maybe I had, such as like wrapping my legs really tightly around each other. And like, I was like, oh, I never even noticed I did that. And then maybe one or two other things, and then I sort of became a little bit more aware about the sensory side of things, which never, here I am assessing child after child, noting down their sensory differences. Not 1 second did I look at myself over that process. But so they sort of like were mentioning stuff like that. And then I still hadn't had my son at this stage, but a few kind of years later, I had my son. And I think kind of what I noticed, I found some of the things, I could be at work doing probably 5 different jobs at any one time. Okay. And then I had my son, and then I couldn't do all the things that well anymore. I just realized that like all of my systems were not really working so well, coupled with like, I think sleep deprivation, probably hormonal stuff going on. And so I sort of like, I kind of at the time, it was just like something in my mind. I was like, okay, I remember I had to do this awful like breastfeeding schedule where things weren't going well, and I had to pump and I had to breastfeed, and then I had to time, and the nurse would also ask me what time that I'd done all these things and I could never answer them. And I was like, is this normal? Like, what's going on? And so then also like, my journey to parenthood was a very tricky one in itself. So I was really, by the time my gorgeous Louis came along, I was so pumped to have him. I was so delighted. It was like the best, most amazing thing that's ever happened to me in my whole life was having my lovely Louis. But and before I had him, I used to dream about being on maternity leave. Like I used to dream about this maternity leave where I'd be like rocking around with my cappuccinos and watching box sets and everything would be great. And I got really bored on maternity leave, and I was like, oh, I didn't expect this at all. What's going on? Like my brain wouldn't stop thinking of other things to do, like businesses to open, side hustles. Like I just could not stop. And I was like, oh, what is wrong with me? Like I actually didn't even think of that either. I was just like, oh, this is different to what I thought. I couldn't focus on a box set for the whole thing. I couldn't actually do what I thought I was going to enjoy doing, and I wanted to get back to doing a little bit of work where I'd research a bit more about Gestalt language processing. And like I just noticed there was a bit of a difference to my other friends on maternity leave, and then I got back into the working life, and one day something popped up on my phone, like a pop-up to say, do this ADHD test for, and I did it, and I was like, oh yeah, that's me. And I was like, oh, and then the recommendation at the end was go and get an assessment. And I was like, God, I wonder how accurate those are. I'll do another one. So I did 2 more, and they were all saying, go get yourself an assessment. And actually doing those questionnaires was so eye-opening and so empowering in itself, because I suddenly had language for the stuff I probably just thought I was rubbish at, or would give myself a hard time over, or, just my whole life just seemed so like, everything seemed a bit clearer. And I have to laugh because over that process, like like alongside this sort of my own personal thing, then I was going deeper and deeper and deeper into the neurodiversity affirming world, professionally. So like I was like, you know, really intrigued in it. It really resonated with me, moving away from the medical model into the social model of disability and what it means to be neurodiversity affirming, and really celebrating for people who like who they are. I remember I ordered all of these jumpers. They're Play Spark jumpers. I've got one on today that
Oh, I
says
saw you. It's so cool.
neurodiversity is
Is
natural. So I'd ordered all these jumpers to like wear my slogans of neurodiversity affirming practice. And by the time, they took ages to come from America, and by the time they'd arrived, I'd gone for the assessment and got my own diagnosis of ADHD, which just still to this day really makes me giggle. So I'm not even sure if I answered your question there, but I guess it sort of made a few things clearer in my life in terms of I had a very brief stint working in a school that was based on ABA basically. I lasted 3 months there, and every single thing they were doing really jarred with me. I got really sick while I worked there, physically and probably mentally as well. And I had like a visceral response to that ABA approach, and that kind of, now I kind of know why, because it really isn't respectful of neurodivergent people. In the end, they fired me.
I didn't want to say that. I was like, I don't know if you're going to tell everyone you got fired, because I remember you telling me that story. The first day we were on like a call together, this is probably about a year ago or more, and we were both roaring laughing going, of course Julie got fired. You're like, you really didn't know.
And I was so devastated because, you know, I've done, you know, on my other placements or other work placements, I'd always like done really well. They'd be asking me to stay when they gave my notice in. And then after 3 months, they asked me to go, but they did me the biggest favor. I thank you if you're listening, anyone from the school, because it just really affirmed to me what I stand for in my own practice as a therapist. And like, I know when something feels right in my own gut and when something really does not feel right. And it kind of made me really, really clear that I will never practice ABA, never, I will publicly say it's not okay. And basically based on that. So I probably gave you a massive answer to it.
No, but you gave me so many insights. Joel, I was laughing about when you were saying about the assessment for ADHD, when I was like, so obviously I've done, as you can see by my office, if this is good, I'm assuming I probably will pop out this video as well, say on YouTube or wherever. And there's books like ever on autism. And I remember like going for those online assessments. I was like, what do I even need? Like, I know I'm autistic. I was like, but I need someone that doesn't know me. So it's like, I'll do one of those online assessments. And whenever one I did, I had scored it like, it could have been like 99% definitely autistic, go for an assessment. And I remember saying it to a friend of mine. She goes, you can't cheat on those, Amanda. Like, you can't be cheat. I was like, why would I cheat on a self? Like, who does that benefit? Definitely. And I was like, just people think I cheat on autism assessment. But I remember just being really appalled. Then afterwards being like, then I was like, but that kind of made me doubt myself, because then I was going, maybe I have too much knowledge. I've inadvertently cheated because I have the knowledge base. But then luckily went for an assessment and turned out I was in fact definitely, as I call it, definitely autistic.
Oh look, I have days now where I'm like, God, did they get that wrong? Did they?
No, they didn't, Julie. Me and you in our chats, I'm like, for anyone listening, last week I was chatting to Julie and I was saying, you know, I was in the middle of, I was actually I've put out last week a free AAC resource. I was designing that. I think that's what I was doing, and I was getting that ready to put out, just to, you know, share for free to the community. And then randomly I had this thought of, I need to make something for St. Patrick's Day. So then I was like going, and then I was like, Amanda, go back and finish what you're doing. Like, so I was chit-chatting to Julie going, like, it is a great thing, because obviously I haven't gone for an assessment, but I very strongly believe I'm also ADHD. And I remember just saying, she like, I nearly felt like crying because I was so embarrassed. I was like, nobody knows. Now everybody knows, listens to the podcast. But I was like, Julie, like, I felt like crying. Then I was like, what's wrong with you? And I was like, why can I not just get my mind to do the thing? But then I'd stop and say, it's okay that my mind works the way that it does. And instead of blaming myself and feeling bad about it, saying, okay, but isn't it good that I know my mind now, and I could move myself back away from the St. Patrick's Day activities and go back to the AAC resource that I was developing. But I just remember thinking, it's great to have that self-compassion now. And do you feel for yourself now when you have like those tricky days or tricky moments, that knowing that you are safe as a parent listening and saying, should I bring my child for that assessment? Or a person questioning, should I go for that ADHD assessment? Do you feel that knowing now that you are a person with ADHD or an ADHD, do you feel that has benefited you, and that you would say it is a good thing to do for yourself or for your child to have that clearer picture about yourself?
Absolutely, like 100%, because, you know, our brains are just different. So the strategies that work for one person aren't going to work for you. And knowing that alone can help you to move mountains. Like, since I found out, I've pursued loads of things that I had been putting off. Like I've always wanted to open up my own therapy space. I've always wanted to create a space based on what I saw wasn't available, like a space planned exactly like I wanted it to be planned, and for it to do it in a way that it was neurodiversity affirming. And I think knowing and develop courses and do trainings, and I think knowing that my brain works the way it does helps me to put in the supports in place that might be my blind spots, or might be the things, the executive functions that I find tricky. So once anybody can do anything with the right supports, right? So once I know, okay, my executive won't function on that, I need like reminders. I need to have a bit of dopamine in my brain to make me do something. So obviously neurodiversity affirming practice and gestalt language processing is amazing because I love it. I'm really interested in it. So I need interest based. I need to do stuff that I find interesting for work. So I know that about myself. Don't get me accounting. Don't get me doing spreadsheets. All of that stuff can go to my husband. I just delegate tasks I don't have enough dopamine for. And so instead of me going, previous me might have been like, oh God, I'm such a bad business person. I can't bloody pay my tax online or do whatever, or, tax my car when it needs to be taxed or whatever. But now I just say, oh no, this is okay. I give myself that lovely self-compassion. And I try and if I'm struggling with something, or if something's going wrong, I try now to problem solve it and try first give myself compassion, say it's grand, and second just say, what can we do next time, or what system can I put in place to help myself. And knowing kind of the challenges of this world, like, and how the neurotypical world is set up, like what do I need personally for me to help me to thrive, and going back as well to your point about being that role model. Like for a while there, I could sort of have to admit it, I sort of felt a bit embarrassed, or a bit like people would think differently of me if they knew that I had ADHD, or they'd kind of maybe see my flaws and my but like actually every day in sessions I'm saying to kids, it's totally cool to be autistic. Like, let's just learn about your brain and how it works. So like, here am I today, probably the most public I've ever spoken about it, saying it's totally cool to be an ADHD, or just learn how your particular brain works, and don't give yourself a hard time in the process, because life's hard enough.
And do you know what, that compassion that you talk about so freely now, even that morning I was telling you on the Zoom about how I nearly went off designing St. Patrick's Day resources because I randomly decided that I needed them. I was like, and then I had a skull, and you were like, well, Amanda, that was you now, supporting yourself. And I was like, yeah, that's right, I was. And then I was feeling great about it all again. So like, the fact that I often feel like people that, and not that people should be identified later in life, but people that are identified later in life, you nearly have that buckets of compassion for other people because you've been through the struggle and you've come out the other side, and you're still, as I often say, I'm still reflecting back. And maybe that leads me to my last question, because I'm just watching our time. I think, do you ever feel, maybe this is just me, I often reflect back to when I was young and maybe tricky moments or even brilliant moments. If you could go back to young Julie now, is there anything that you could say to her, say on the tricky moments or the happy moments, about how your future as Julie, the grown up, was going to turn out? So I often think if I could tell the young Amanda, I'd say, look, everything will turn out okay. I know you're confused now and things like that, but one day I always say, one day everything will be okay, and you'll understand why you find these moments or these things tricky, but one day it'll all make sense. Do you ever feel like, or if you could now, and I'm not saying we're going to magic up mini blonde Julie from back in the day, but if you could reflect back maybe to the younger Julie that didn't yet know she was ADHD, could even be the Julie after giving birth to beautiful Louis, like, is there anything you could say to your younger self that you feel would be almost, I suppose, reflectively compassionate to the younger you that struggled, or maybe didn't struggle, but in some which way, if you had known you were ADHD, then it might have changed the course of your life? And I don't mean negatively or positively, but your own understanding of what was occurring.
Yeah, it'd probably just be to get to know yourself, and to be strengths-based with yourself. Like, sometimes I think you're really blinded by what you can't do. And I think as neurodivergent people, we often are experiencing quite a lot of failure, or like things that are really easy to other people, we find really hard. And so you kind of constantly, even in micro moments throughout your day, feeling like, oh, that was really hard. And like, I remember just like being so fascinated by the way other people used to live their lives, and finish exams and be able to study when they're meant to be able to study. And like, so try and just sort of understand who you are, not and know that it's different to your peer, and sort of spend a bit of time on that, because I know, like, a lot of us neurodivergents as well, we will mask and try and copy our peers, sometimes not that successfully. And I think, I got to a point in like, it's not actually even that long ago, where I actually couldn't even pick a lampshade for my house, because I'd spent my whole life sort of looking at others and trends and what everybody else is doing, and I'd go to pick something for myself and not actually know what I wanted. So just sort of like tuning into yourself, in whatever way that means for a little kid, and having someone, I guess, to do that with you will be really helpful. So having supportive family members, having supportive teachers, I think that would really, really be the thing I'd say to myself.
That was really lovely. I put myself on mute because I talked over you, but that's myself being autistic. I didn't want to talk over you, but I thought it was really lovely. And even like you saying, like the things that you thought you were getting wrong or making the mistakes on, they were actually, you were being, not by anyone negatively, but you were being held up to standards that were never going to be within your realm or your capacity, because you were not and never were neurotypical, you're neurodivergent. So therefore it was literally an impossible task at the outset. And had that been known, perhaps then you wouldn't have held yourself up to that light saying, well, why can't I meet the shine of that light, when actually your reflection was in a different light completely, that you were actually so emboldened by, but you weren't to find out just yet what that was going to be.
Yeah, and just to kind of finally say, I just know that all neurodivergent people, like all people, have like huge strengths, and they might be different strengths. So we never want those deficits to sort of overshadow those strengths. We have to focus on strengths, because I think that's like the essence of who we are, really, what value like we have, and the different kind of ways in which we add to society, I guess, and to ourselves.
That's so lovely, but it's actually so true as well, that if we can focus on the strengths of each individual person, then not only will it support them, but it will support them throughout their lives to understand themselves. And I really think that self-awareness is the key to everything. And I just, as an autistic person, a neurodivergent person, but also a parent to neurodivergent children, I'm so delighted that people like you exist in the world, that there is a therapy space like BeMe therapy. And as you were chatting, I was like, I wish there was one in Mayo, because I'd be your first and only client. I'd be like booking you out for all the sessions. But genuinely, I just think, I wish there was a Julie Holmes to be my pal when I was growing up with, and I mean that, and we chit chat all the time, so I mean it. But I also just wish for children like my own, and I always say this on social, I trust very few people with my children, but I would trust you in your incredible BeMe therapy, hands down, any day of the week. I think you're fabulous. And for any parents listening, if there's a place that you should definitely go to in society to support your gorgeous children, it is absolutely hands down BeMe therapy. And I don't say that, as you notice on social, I recommend very few things, but if I do recommend them, I mean it. And I do mean, Julie, thank you, because I'm glad you got fired from that job.
My eyes are watering. I think there's makeup in them now.
Yeah, I must say. But no, I'm glad you got fired from that school. That wasn't for you, but I really genuinely mean it. I'm glad that you exist in the world, and I'm glad that BeMe therapy exists, because children deserve the best. You provide the best, and for families just like mine, they have a place to go to now. So huge thanks to you. Thanks to all our listeners, and I'll give the last word to yourself, Julie, if you can get out the last word from your tears.
Yeah, I had a little emotional moment there, because what I do is just means so much to me. And when and I think I'm hugely passionate about this arena changing for families like yours, Amanda. I don't think we have been getting it right, and I think the more kind of places like BeMe that are neurodiversity affirming, and practitioners that have these sort of respectful attitudes, the better. So I'm hoping that this landscape will change for gorgeous families like your own and like those listening, and keep reaching out to people that are supportive and positive, I would say. And thank you so much for having me on the podcast.
Well, I am so thrilled, between having Teresa last week and now yourself. That's Teresa Foley, the specialist in feeding therapy, and your incredible self. I'm just so thrilled to have you. And also, I forgot to say at the start of the podcast, you have actually a brand new course out for parents. And I know daily, we'll say, accessing in-person therapy isn't for everyone, and they mightn't have the capacity. But do you want to tell everyone for the last word, the new program that yourself and I'm going to get the name wrong, Aoife Tierney, senior speech and language therapist, have co-developed?
Yeah, Aoife and I, we had lots of time where people have been getting in touch with us, asking us for services, and our time is only so much. We can't kind of see everybody, unfortunately. So to plug this gap, we have created a self-paced course that's based around Gestalt language processing and AAC. So it's kind of I think you've got 4 months to access the course. So it's kind of self-paced, but what we wanted to do is make sure that people, because I know what I'm like, if I have forever to do it, I will take forever to do it. So sort of have a limit on it and create a bit of community online, so that you'll have different kind of tasks and challenges, and you can join in as much or as little as you want in the community forum. But it's called Let's Communicate Together. You can find us on Instagram. And if you have any questions at all, just pop us a message and be sure to answer them too. And you can sign up for the newsletter as well if you want some more information. And we'll share even more. It's starting on the 20th of January, this first intake, and there's some spaces left. So if you're interested, do drop
Brilliant.
us a line.
And I'll make sure in the description of this podcast that I have the links to everything that Julie has just referenced. And definitely it's a must go to. I've been very lucky to work with Julie in the past on different projects and also with Aoife. And I'm always blown away by both ladies. So again, I'll leave you all because I know we're coming up to the hour almost. So thank you again. Huge thanks. Big fangirl moment for myself to have Julie Holmes on the podcast. So I'll go. Thanks to everyone for listening, and we'll see you all again, chat to you all again next week. So bye.
Bye.